The Grateful Dead helped define the libertine values of 1967's infamous Summer of Love, the coalescence of hippie culture that sent shockwaves through straight America. The psychedelic miscreants journeyed from their Haight-Ashbury birthplace to find a home away from home in the high country of Colorado. In early September of 1967, Chet Helms and his team opened a Denver branch of San Francisco's Family Dog, where the Grateful Dead played its first Colorado gigs. The police made life difficult for the Family Dog, and the venue didn't last long. But the Grateful Dead had planted a flag in Colorado and had plenty of success over the next 28 years. No one seems to have any photos or recordings of these 1967 appearances. For poster art collectors, the rare locally distributed version by Dennis Nolan is notable for the overprinted Grateful Dead on the skull and a ticket outlet strip along the bottom border. Following the Family Dog gig, a free concert in Denver's City Park, billed as a Human Bein', also showcased Captain Beefheart and the Magic Band and other groups. The defining event planted the seeds of the counterculture in Colorado. Guitarist Jerry Garcia's speakers weren't adjusted for the mile-high altitude.
It was an outdoor show, a loose, weird affair. Timothy Leary was there. I'd just gotten a brand new set of JBL speakers, not guitar models, the hi-fi version, and the first note I hit, I blew out every speaker. I sounded like somebody playing into a telephone from a half mile away. Jerry Garcia.
The Grateful Dead were in Salt Lake City the night before Boulder and in Nebraska 2 days later, hopscotching across the country to Boston and back over a 3-week period and showing off the amazing suite of music that was about to be released as Live Dead. At a music store in Colorado, Jerry Garcia purchased a Zane Beck pedal steel guitar and soon began playing it in public. The Dead played at home on June 29th, in Colorado July 3rd, and in Chicago July 4th, the kind of gonzo touring that made their road crew legendary. The Colorado gig took place in a barn outside of Colorado Springs. The set list, fairly typical of this transitional period between the band's psychedelic warrior phase and their incipient incarnation as an Americana jam band, ranged from The Green Green Grass of Home to Casey Jones to Turn On Your Love Light. Two shows at Mammoth Gardens, now known as Denver's Fillmore Auditorium, contained the only acoustic sets the Dead ever played in Colorado. The New Riders of the Purple Sage were also on the bills in this period, which meant that Jerry Garcia played pedal steel, acoustic, and electric guitars over the course of the show. The band's first stadium show in Colorado was marked by torrential rains, rare performances, Rockin' Pneumonia and the Boogie Woogie Flu, and at one point, hundreds of lids of pot were tossed into the air from the crowd and from the stage.
That blew our minds. The audience thought we were doing it, but it wasn't us. We couldn't afford it. That was truly a cosmic day. The look of the concert, the weather. Jerry Garcia.
It rained rain and ounces of marijuana, and we almost burned down the place. It got real crazy. It looked like St. Elmo's fire all over the stage at one point. Bob Weir.
"1973 is sometimes overlooked in critical assessments of the Dead's musical development, but it was a spectacularly creative year. The band introduced 6 new songs in February and a couple more later, and every one of them remained in the repertoire for the rest of the band's days. And their collective improvisation was at a peak at this time, including the 2 marathon performances in Denver, long stretches of exploratory jamming with their minds completely merged. As Phil Lesh said in his autobiography, their goal was to play as one unit, like the fingers on a hand. Concert promoter Barry Fay offered free tickets to any fan who could produce a stub from the band's 1967 Family Dog show. By now, the Dead had acquired the music world's most loyal and fanatical following, thanks to their commitment to improvisation, ever-changing set lists, and allowing enthusiasts to make and trade recordings of their shows. Many fans consider 1977 the band's best year. The Dead did its first shows at the 9,000-seat Red Rocks Amphitheater, which the musicians considered a sacred place, like Stonehenge and the Pyramids of Egypt. Fans also loved the iconic venue. A young Bill Walton, who had just won his first NBA championship, hung out backstage on crutches. A cover of Warren Zevon's Werewolves of London concluded the second show, one of only a dozen Grateful Dead performances of the song.
I was awestruck by the place when I walked in. You can use all the power you can get up there because you're basically gasping for air if you're singing or playing a horn. You just don't get a lot of air to work with. Bob Weir.
The Dead's 4 Red Rocks appearances show up in the set list compendium as consecutive shows because the band didn't do any gigs in the 7 weeks between the 2 two-day runs. They went into the studio to record Shakedown Street. At the August shows, they debuted 5 new songs from the album: I Need a Miracle, Stagger Lee, Shakedown Street, If I Had the World to Give, and From the Heart of Me. The Dead's colorful following was in full force in and around Red Rocks for the first of a 3-show stand. Police and park personnel chased as many as 2,000 illegal campers from the park, and folks partied and did the window pane dance around the bonfire at Chief Hosa Campground. At least 200 people without tickets also tried to sneak in, which resulted in one man falling 35 feet to his death while trying to climb the rock behind the stage area. With new member Brent Midland behind the Hammond organ and other keyboards, the band introduced new songs from Go to Heaven. Heavy rain forced the festivities into McNichols Arena for the second and third shows.
The first show at Red Rocks will stand out until the day I die. You couldn't see more than 20 feet into the audience. The front row was up to its waist in water because the drains had backed up. The rain and the wind were coming at us perpendicular, whipping off the cymbals. If you stopped playing, you died. It was so awesome to play against that awesome force, you had to give it up to the moment. It was so much larger than the music. Mickey Hart.
With a pair of concerts in Boulder, a hotbed of Deadhead activity, the band celebrated its 15th anniversary, measured from the week in June 1965 when Phil Lesh joined the Warlocks, the first incarnation of the Grateful Dead. With Brent Midland fully integrated, the band settled into a bluesy arena rock sound that sustained them for the next decade. The two shows had a surprising number of repeated songs, leading many among the dedicated to believe that the better versions of each would appear on an upcoming live album. The Dead did record a couple dozen shows in the fall, resulting in the acoustic album Reckoning and the electric album Dead Set. The first show included a cover of Man Smart, Woman Smarter, a calypso song by way of Robert Palmer that entered the Dead's repertoire a few days earlier, and the Rolling Stones' Satisfaction, which the band played 30 times between November 1980 and August 1994.
Satisfaction was one of those little clouds of madness that drifted across the stage. When I really feel like doing Satisfaction, it's because I'm feeling pretty ringy. We have never done that one remotely the same twice, and obviously we've never ever rehearsed the song. Bob Weir.
A routing gig on the way home from an Eastern swing that began just after Thanksgiving. At the end of the show, Bob Weir told the crowd, "We like this place. We'll be back." But it would be the band's last appearance in Boulder. Rain marred the Grateful Dead's three-night stand at Red Rocks, giving the famed outdoor venue the sobriquet Wet Rocks. Highlights included a rare electric She's on the Road Again, a jug band favorite that Weir revived for the 1980 acoustic sets that yielded Reckoning, and Might As Well, which was only played 7 times that year. With the return of good weather at Red Rocks, the band attracted a second generation of loyal Deadheads. The demand for tickets grew to daunting levels. Highlights included Help on the Way, Into Slipknot, reinstated into the lineup earlier in '83 after 6 years on the bench. The third of 3 nights at Red Rocks featured the band's live debut of Traffic's Dear Mr. Fantasy. Jerry Garcia's drug and health issues were the major topic of discussion in the Deadhead world. The crush for tickets and the impact on the town of Morrison had negative consequences. On the third night, the band performed The Frozen Logger and The Star-Spangled Banner on kazoos, while a technical issue delayed the start of the show. During the second set, a first-ever Hey Jude coda was appended to the end of Dear Mr. Fantasy, which the Deadhead debuted at Red Rocks a year earlier. Although the band had had neither a hit single nor a platinum album, it ranked as one of America's most successful touring acts.
We're just the slowest growing rock and roll band in the world. Jerry Garcia.
The band's last shows at Red Rocks celebrated Garcia's recovery from his diabetic coma in 1986. The album In the Dark, released a month before these shows, drew massive media attention when it yielded the only top 10 hit in Grateful Dead history, Touch of Grey. The influx of new fans, drawn by the music and the freewheeling scene that followed the band around, led to problems at and around the shows.
We play 2 or 3 nights at a venue. That's enough time for a whole cottage economy to set up, the Deadhead Mall with vendors selling stuff. That became an attraction of its own. Many people have started camping outside, and it's just gotten too visible. It scares people in the towns. Bob Weir.
The Grateful Dead and the Deadheads celebrated the harmonic convergence in the historic mountain village of Telluride. Upon learning the Dead were coming, the locals expressed some concerns, but the 2 shows ran smoothly, thanks to diligent and persuasive advance work by promoter Bill Graham and his team. Law enforcement officers agreed that thousands of Deadheads and even most of the 22 arrested were cooperative and peaceful. Afterwards, the town gave enthusiastic praise for the music, the Deadheads, and for the dollars the horde of Flatlanders brought with them. Following the death of Brent Midland after the summer tour, the Dead recruited former Tubes keyboardist Vince Welnick and invited longtime friend Bruce Hornsby to help out on grand piano while Welnick got up to speed. Dark Star opened the first night, and closed the third. Several years of effort by the band and their older fans imparted some wisdom and cultural norms to the newer fans, and the scene around the tour calmed down a little. For a while.
I'd like to think you're seeing a new Deadhead, a new responsible version for the 90s. We can't come into a community and pact it without there being some resentment and trouble. So if they want the Grateful Dead, they've got to deal with their scene. It's not the cops or the authorities, it's the fans and us. We can hone this fun machine together. Make ye heart.
The band's last stadium show in Colorado was the final show on a summer tour with Santana, another famous San Francisco band, opening. This lineup, with Welnick on keyboards and Hornsby on piano and accordion, continued into the spring of 1992. Welnick came from another musical world altogether, but Hornsby had played in a Dead cover band with his brother Bobby in the 70s.
I was never a very good sideman because I was never very good at playing the exact same part. I was always restless and wanted to blow, and with the Dead, you often do just that. We're kindred spirits in that sense, and I like their songs. I think they've written 60 great ones. As a songwriter myself, I appreciate that. I'm really a fan. Bruce Hornsby.
Fans were eager to reunite with the band after a hiatus caused by another Jerry Garcia health scare. But many were upset that Colorado voters had passed an anti-gay rights measure between the time the tickets were sold and the dates of the shows. A group of Deadheads organized a national campaign to fund and design a billboard to protest the measure. Sporting a Grateful Dead steely icon with a pink triangle replacing the lightning bolt and framed with the words "Ain't No Time to Hate" and "Undo 2", the effort made the front page of the Boulder newspaper and received coverage from all the local news outlets. The Dead kicked off a short end-of-year tour with 3 midweek shows in Denver. Garcia's performances in this era tended to be a little shaky, with occasional flashes of fire. His quieter songs tended to form the emotional core of his performances. As he once said, a moment of perfect silence always occurred deep in the second set. In the third show, that moment happened during The Days Between, the last work from the monumental collaboration of Garcia and lyricist Robert Hunter. The song provided an elegy for, if not quite a narrative of, the Dead itself.
We try to actually rehearse before going on tour. Pick up the instrument again, look at it and say, let's see, this finger goes here. Usually we'll do it just to say hello, get new material across to the band. Phil Lesh.
Speculation and rumor mounted about the declining health of Jerry Garcia, who was widely recognized as the group's musical and spiritual leader. a mantle he rejected but was never able to shake. On August 9, 1995, the celebrated singer-guitarist died in his sleep at a drug and alcohol treatment center near San Francisco. The surviving members of the band, along with other musicians, toured as The Other Ones.